Nugget, I made 40 here, so I want to discuss a widespread belief on the distant right, and that is essentially that our elites are trying to screw us over, that they hate us, that they want to destroy us. What's really going on here? And I just noticed how incredibly toxic this way of thinking is. So that's why I want to combat it. Okay, first of all, you don't hate people who don't threaten you. So let's say the elites hate us and they want to kill us. That makes no sense because nobody hates people who are below them in social status, right? So if the elites do indeed hate Middle America, do indeed hate Trump voters, then the elites don't have as much power as you suppose, because we don't hate people who have no ability to affect us. We don't hate people who are completely lacking in power, right? We only hate people who have the power to threaten us. So this notion that the elites hate us and want us to die, it's internally self-contradictory. Nobody hates someone who's below them in social status. All right? So it's an illusion, it's a cope, it's a way of, I don't know, living with your envy and trying to be productive about it, I suppose. But it's just has such an incredibly toxic effect on your life. So just think about people you hate. You don't hate people who are below you in social status. You don't hate people who don't threaten you. You don't hate people who don't have things that you want, right? You only hate people who are a threat. So if the elites do indeed hate us, which I don't believe, then that means that we're a threat and they don't have as much power as we suppose. So I don't like this thinking of outgroups, different groups, or the elite, that they're evil, that they're devils, that they're monsters, that they're goblins, that they're lizards, that they're from the forces of darkness. I don't like that thinking because of the effect that it has on the people who think that way. So I prefer to look at people as being just like me, only with a little different biology, little different life experience, and a little different life situation. So if I had their biology, their life experience, and their life situation, I would be thinking and acting like them. So I don't think outgroups, other people are unfathomable. I think everybody is fathomable. So I see the effect of this thinking on people, this conspiratorial thinking, that there are these dastardly groups out there who are plotting to destroy us. Now, indeed, sometimes there may well be groups out there who are plotting to destroy us. But in general, I think this conspiratorial thinking does not serve one. Right? This thinking makes you angry, it makes you magnify your hurt, makes you feel vengeful, makes you feel petty, makes you volatile, makes you criminally inclined, makes you want to hurt people, makes you antisocial. It alienates you from others, particularly anyone who doesn't share your conspiratorial thinking. Thus, it makes you lonely. It leads you to being volatile, so often you'll lash out and not quite realize why you're lashing out. You'll be less able to get along with people. You'll be less able to appreciate life. It poisons your soul to think this way. It temporarily makes you feel better, temporarily makes you feel stronger. It temporarily, like, power, temporarily allows you to feel on a divine mission. It temporarily gives you a heroic role that you are tackling evil, but it saps the soul. The elite love us. Well, do you love the elite? That's absurd to think that people hate you. Why did they always denigrate white men? So who's they, and how are they always denigrating white men? So it's absurd to think about any group that doesn't know you, that they love you or hate you. They're not selfish monsters. They're just like you, bro. They are just like you, except they're elite. Right? People think that the rich are different. Yeah, the rich are different in that they have more money. The elite are different. Yeah, the elite are different in that they are elite. Other than that, they're just like us. Everybody's just like us, only with slightly different biology, slightly different life experiences, or dramatically different life experiences, and a different life situation. So nobody hates those who are below them in social status. We only hate people who are a threat to us. If we are a threat to the elites, if Trump voters are a threat to the elites, then the elites don't have that much power. Like, why would they feel threatened by us? And you don't hate someone who's way below you in status. You don't hate someone who doesn't threaten you. So for people who are below us in social status, we scorn them. We scorn them. We don't think about it. So if the elites are elite, then by definition, they're not going to be thinking about it very much at all. But none of us think much about people who are below us in social status. You don't think much about the homeless. You don't think much about the total dregs of society. You don't think much about people who are below you in social status. People who are below you in social status, they don't bother you. They might come onto a live stream, they might criticize you, but you could care less. You could even host shows with people who, what's wrong with my mic? So you can host shows with people who are below you in social status, and they could criticize you, and it's not going to bother you. Okay. So the microphone.
Had chronic pain, which seems crazy. How could there be that many people? There's only 300 and some million people in the country. I saw a kid this morning who's 19. He's been in pain since he was 12. No one can explain why he's in pain. He's had a very extensive medical workup and testing, and it didn't reveal the cause of his pain. So his pain is being treated as the disease called chronic pain. But our treatment, as you'll see, for the disease called chronic pain isn't always that good. And about 12 years ago, I learned some stuff about pain that shocked me and amazed me and blew me away, because it was looking at pain in a way that different than what I'd been trained for my 20 years of being a doctor. Because we think in medicine of pain kind of as a static process. We think it's, well, you have pain, you have chronic pain, so there's something wrong, and if we can't find it and if we can't fix it, which unfortunately is often the case with chronic pain, therefore you have chronic pain. And what I learned was that pain can be a dynamic process, a changeable process, and that the brain has tremendous influence on pain. So,
okay, let's see if my mic sounds a little better now. So I will follow along in the chat. All right. No, don't trust the elites. You don't know them. They don't know you. So I think why not just look at them as people like you? Do you spend time thinking about people you don't know? No. Do you spend time thinking about people who are way below you? No. Do you spend time hating people who don't threaten you? No. And do I still have bad sound? Let me know in the chat. So trying to compose my argument here. What's going on with my sound? Looking here, seems to be okay. All right. So I've composed some arguments about the dangers of buying into this conspiratorial thinking that the elites are hating you and they want to kill you. All right. So here are some of the dangers. So I'm not arguing now that this thinking is false. I'm arguing now that it's bad for you. So it's bad for your health to be filled with envy and scorn, particularly envy. I want to focus on envy. Okay, tell me if there are still mic problems. Okay, so envy creates feelings of shame, anger, hurt, and rage, right? You do not have envy without having feelings of shame that you don't measure up, that other people have what you don't have and you want it. You can't have envy without anger. You can't have envy without rage, and you can't have envy without a diminished sense of your own control. Is the sound working or not? Just please let me know, and if it's not, I'll fix it. Right. So let's not tackle the argument head on. Let's just caricature it. Be the docile worker, or the elite will be justified in replacing you with Jamal. So nobody cares to tell me whether or not my sound is all right. So I will power on. So envy, it occupies your mind in useless directions, because envy means that other people have what you want and you want to take it from them. Right? Jealousy is when other people threaten something that you have. Okay, thanks, Ricardo. My sound is fine. You just wish it was. Okay, so you're jealous when someone threatens something that you have. Envy is different. Envy is when someone else has something that you want. So if you view the elite as having power, and of course, by definition, elites have power, then you are feeling envy. They've got something that you want. So when you have envy, you have a decreased sense of your own ability to control your own life. When you have envy, you're kind of outsourcing much of your sense of control to other parties. It's like, these people out there, they have the power over me. And so it produces feelings of helplessness, produces feelings of volatility. It produces feelings of rage. You're not always going to be able to control what you say or do when you're filled with envy. So envy takes your mind in useless directions, and it saps inner resources that could be better deployed, building your kingdom, building your life, or banding together with other people to make a difference in society. So envy tends to make you volatile. So everyone that I notice who believes that the elites hate them and want them dead, everybody I know well who's like this is an alcoholic, a drug addict, highly self-destructive, volatile, flying off the handle, saying things that they later regret. So envy creates this volatility because you have so much pent-up rage that other people are controlling your life and that they have power that you believe belongs to you, that you're going around with this permanent sense of outrage. So envy reduces your ability to like yourself and to trust yourself, because envy, you're preoccupied with something that you don't have and you feel like other people have, and it really belongs to you. And so the volatility that comes with envy, it reduces your own ability to make good judgments and to trust yourself. Envy reduces your ability for human connection and then receiving benefit from those connections. If you're envious, let's say you're envious of your boss, okay, that's going to reduce your ability to get along with your boss. You're going to be more volatile. You'll be more likely to say and do things that you regret. If, let's say you go to a party and you run into a guy who is a commentator for CNN. So without envy, you could possibly enjoy a productive, useful conversation with this guy. But if you envy him, you'll be much more likely to say the wrong thing, to tick him off, to embarrass yourself, and to destroy the opportunity for genuine human connection. So nothing predicts happiness like the quality of one's social ties, right? Our happiness in life essentially boils down to the quality of our relationships with other people. And when we have envy of other people, then that reduces our ability to get along with them. It reduces our openness to them. So we scorn down, right? For people who are below us, we don't think much about them. We just dismiss them. So we don't think about their humanity. We don't empathize with them. We just dismiss them. We don't think about people below us in social status. And then we only have envy for people who have things that we don't have, who are above us. So that's going to reduce our ability to get along with them. I remember I once went to a party and I was introduced to a guy and I just immediately hated him because I thought the host of the party was my girlfriend. and I was kind of jealous that he had this attractive, fine woman. And so I started off the evening hating this guy, and then he turned into my best friend. I came to my senses later on in the party, and he was a very good friend to me. There were about 6 months in 1994 when I was living out of my car, and I'd often go to his place to take a shower. You know, he helped me out countless ways. So once I was able to get over my envy, I was able to, open up to genuine human connection with him, and he became my best friend in Los Angeles. Nobody wants to admit to envy, right? It's embarrassing to admit to envy. Like, what are examples of envy, and how has it played a role in your life? Nobody wants to admit to that. People who admit to sexually transmitted diseases, people will admit to a bankruptcy, people who admit to being an alcoholic, but nobody wants to admit to envy. So if you don't want to admit to it, it means that there's less of you that you can share with other people. It reduces your ability to share your life with others. It increases the gap between the reality of life as you experience it and what you can admit to other people. So envy makes you less transparent and therefore less integrated. Envy and scorn reduce your ability to notice the humanity in other people, and thus it limits and distorts your understanding of reality. So you'll impute all sorts of powers and malevolence to those that you're envious of, and you will not notice the humanity in those you scorn. Envy is exhausting. Envy makes people unhappy, and sane people don't want to hang out with people who are miserable. So happy people, I notice, are rarely envious. Envious people are rarely happy. So I notice that those who believe that the elites hate us and want us dead, I never notice that these are happy people. They never seem socially well adjusted. They just seem filled with useless rage. So every person I know who is filled with envy is also miserable. They're usually an alcoholic or a drug addict or some type of addict untreated. Envy destroys trust. It destroys your ability to trust people. It kills one's motivation to participate fully in society. Why would you want to get more deeply involved in the political process if the elites hate us and want us dead, right? It's all pointless. So envy reduces your ability to compromise, reduces your ability to recognize the human in other people. It reduces your motivation to participate more fully in life because you think, what's the use? The elite have got this all sewn up, and they're just trying to kill us. The envy is toxic for relationships. For people who don't share your conspiratorial thinking, they're not going to want to be around you. So nobody sane wants to hang out with people whose lives are dominated by envy. Envy makes us hate ourselves because we're thinking all the time about how other people have what we really want, what we think belongs to us. Envy distracts us from acknowledging and dealing with the gaping wounds in our own life. So envy is a distraction. So instead of feeling the pain of not achieving as much as we want, instead of feeling the pain that my mother doesn't love me, my father doesn't respect me, my wife doesn't want to have sex with me, my brother and sister don't want anything to do with me, my kids scorn me. So envy is a way of distracting ourselves from these gaping wounds in our real life. I've never seen positive byproducts from people becoming more envious. It never seems to lead to greater happiness, inner peace, or any of the good things in life. Envy makes us feel one down, right? That someone has things that we want, that we believe belong to us, and that we're being robbed of them. So we're going to feel one down, we're going to feel less than. As a result, we're going to be more likely to be hyper vigilant. Like, I know they're trying to screw me. I know they're trying to hurt me. I know they're trying to kill me. If you believe that America's elites want to kill you, you're going to be exhausted. You're going to be unhealthy. You're going to have unnecessary fight or flight complex. You're going to be hyper vigilant. You're not going to be able to walk down the street on a sunny day and enjoy yourself. You're not going to be at ease if you have envy. Envy reduces our ability to make positive contributions to other people, and thus reduces our chances for real happiness. As long as we're in envy, we're not going to be thinking about how we can be of service to others or how we can join in with other people to get things done. Envy tends to make you cynical. And so that reduces your ability to appreciate what's true and good and beautiful and sweet and innocent and delightful and lovely in life. Envy drives you towards saying things on social media that will hurt your real life. Envy drives you towards saying things in your real life that will hurt your real life. Envy powers a volatile witch's brew of emotions, and you just never know how they are going to explode. Luke's gained a lot of experience from alcoholics and drug addicts and losers. Did this come from his car living days? It came mainly from my 10 years in 12-step programs. Also, I worked construction for about 3 years, and I recognized so many of these traits in me. I envy Luke's ability to continually shift his beliefs while maintaining his status as the heel, the villain of his own show. Yes, I change my beliefs frequently. All right, so come on, guys. I put a lot of effort into this monologue. I hope you appreciate this. Envy distorts our self-understanding. Envy leads us to embrace victimhood. Right? We're being screwed over. The elites hate us, want us dead. They're taking our country away. They're robbing us of everything that's precious. They're making us uncomfortable in our own homes. The elite are sending poisonous snakes into our own home. And so this tends to lead to a victimhood mindset, and it distorts an accurate understanding of ourselves and of other people. Envy leads to conspiratorial thinking, that there are these nefarious groups out there who want us dead, and conspiratorial thinking is the sure mark of a loser. So we tend to think of people who are more successful than us as cold, and that's a cognitive distortion of reality. People who are more successful than us are no more likely to be cold than we are. And we tend to think of people who are less successful of us as warm but incompetent. And that's not necessarily true either. So whether people are more or less successful than us tells us nothing about whether they are warm or kind or cold. And people who are a little more successful than us, they may well be more competent than us in some areas, but overall, there's no reason to believe that they are overall more competent than us at navigating life. Envy leads you to deliberately harm others, which provokes retaliation. When you're filled with envy, you want revenge, and you are much more likely to lash out at people, and that always provokes a retaliation. So our fate in life is partly determined by our emotions, right? We like to think that our fate is just, determined by our rational thinking, but our emotions play a very significant role. And so envy is an emotion. And if we're driven by envy, that's going to, in part, determine our fate in life. Do you really want your fate in life decided by the dark emotion of envy? Your envy reduces the incentives for others to do great things for fear of being envied and hated by people like you. Right? A lot of people are afraid to pursue greatness. A lot of people are afraid to be positively visible. A lot of people are afraid to become known. A lot of people are afraid to become successful because they don't want to be envied. They fear being envied and hated. They particularly fear being envied and hated by people they grew up with, by their friends. So your benefit all of us. Like if Ricardo gets out there and produces a great movie and wins an Oscar, that makes the world a better place. But if he's afraid to get out there and produce a movie that wins an Oscar because he doesn't want to be envied and hated by everybody in the Luke Ford live stream chat room, then the world's a worse place. The world has lost, greatness, right? We don't want to discourage greatness. People fear being envied. People fear other people hating them for succeeding. And so this fear of being envied and hated reduces many people's motivation to do good or even great things. And envy exhausts us. Envy is tiring. For a little while, it may be energizing, but overall, it promotes, as Susan Fisk puts it, Olympic caliber emotional gymnastics to protect and to promote our fragile selves. So envy transmuted into inspiration, however, can transform you, right? So let's say there's someone in the elite who you envy, but somehow you can change that envy into inspiration and you can allow it to transform you. So instead of, say, spending your spare time talking about how much you hate certain people who succeeded in a big way, instead, if you can use that envy and turn it into inspiration and take inspiration from people who, say, succeeded much more dramatically than you have, then that can transform your life in a positive direction. So why would you want to hold on to something that damages you, such as envy, when you can change it, when you can transmute it into something that serves you and benefits you and makes you better, finer, kinder, more effective? Envy is often accompanied by impotence. Right? The more envious you are, the more you feel hurt by what you don't have because other people have it and you want it. So you lose a sense of control of your own life and you become impotent. Like, do you really want to be impotent? And envy reduces our ability to learn from and about those we envy. So again, you're at a social gathering with someone who's in the elite. Let's say it's a billionaire and he voted for Joe Biden. And so you envy and hate him. And that's going to reduce your ability to have a pleasant conversation with the guy, to learn from the guy, to learn about the guy. Because we tend not to want to get informed about those we envy, except as an opportunity to use the information to, hate and damage those that we envy. Right, let's understand a little bit more about the mind-body connection and understand a little bit more about why envy is so destructive. So the thinking of people like John Sarno, MD, and many other mind-body doctors, their thinking is that many of our health problems and most of our physical pain, 90% of our headaches, 90% of our back pain, neck pain, head pain, stomach pain, digestive problems comes from unconscious rage. So if we have envy, usually we're conscious of it, but there may be a whole lot more rage that we're not conscious of, and that is killing us.
So how powerful is the mind? Are you aware that the mind can cause paralysis? Are you aware of that? Do you know what we call that? Anyone? Psychologists here? Conversion disorder. I saw a teenager a few years ago who he had hip pain, and then his pain went to his chest, and then he had headache pain, and then he had other pain, and then things were getting worse and worse in his life, and the stress was building up, and finally his arm and leg went dead, went paralyzed. And then the leg got better, and all the tests were normal. The leg got better, and then his arm would be paralyzed. He'd wake up in the morning, his arm was fine. He'd go to school, he'd get to school, arm dead. Kids are teasing him at school, bullying him at school. He gets out of school, 3:30, arm fine. Unbelievable. The mind is that powerful. Can the mind cause cardiogenic shock? Yes. There's a syndrome called broken heart syndrome. Have you heard of it? Have you seen anyone with that? It's amazing. Surprise birthday party. Surprise! Oh my God.
Okay, so let me respond to some of the comments in the chat. And the chat says, yes, the elite hate us and want us dead. So how can you be happy with that kind of mindset? Like, how can you be productive? How can you be moving ahead in life with this attitude that the elites of society hate you and want you dead? First of all, it makes no logical sense. We don't hate people who don't matter. We don't hate people who are below us in social status. So if you truly believe that they hate us, then the elites don't have nearly as much power as you ascribe to them, because we don't hate people who are no threat to us. Link says the elite want us to buy their widgets. Well, most people are in some type of sales. Don't you want people to buy your products? The elite want to control us and make us slaves. Well, they're doing a really bad job because you get to go online and say that they want to control us and make us slaves. So I don't feel that they have, this enormous control over me. I don't feel like I'm enslaved. How are they enslaving you? I mean, you must be absolutely miserable. If you feel like the elite are enslaving you and controlling you, how could you not be miserable? And how could you succeed in life with that kind of mindset? And how could other people want to hang out with you if you believe that you're a slave? You can hate people that are annoying. Yeah, but they're only annoying if they're effective, right? So yeah, you're more likely to feel scorn for homeless people. And let's say you have to interact with them every day, and then you can hate them, I suppose, if they're effective at damaging the quality of your life. Demon denial, says Josh. Luke pretending to be an elite liberal apologist. Hilarious 4D comedy. I've never been more disappointed by Luke's poor audio. We're being denied his greatest comedy routine. I put work into this, guys. Do the Blackstone, BlackRock, Carlyle Group, Serco, Google, Facebook, Bronfman, Rothschild Investment Group, and Superclass Elite hate us? No, I don't believe they do. But ask yourself, do you hate them? Right? They're human beings just like you. If they hate you, that means they fear you, that you are a threat. So why would Blackstone, BlackRock, Carlyle, Serco, Google, Facebook, Bronfman, and Superclass elites think that this chat is a threat? I don't feel that they wage psychological warfare against us. So if you feel like they're waging psychological warfare against you, how could you not be miserable? Like, how are they waging psychological warfare? You say, oh, when I turn on TV, they're promoting some left-wing agenda. Well, then don't watch TV. Be careful what you watch. It's not like Russia, the Soviet Union, or some communist states where you are compelled to leave the official party radio on in your home 24/7. So any psychological warfare that they're waging against you, I would assume that you can just tune it out. All right, how's the sound quality? My friend is elite and is now experiencing severe pain and symptoms that are beyond medical explanation. I trust the elite like farm animals, like a farm animal. Trust the farmer. I'm not saying trust the elite. I didn't say anything like about trusting the elite. Do you trust you? Like, should other people trust you? You're a fallible human being. You're a weak human being. Sometimes you have envy and jealousy and rage. Sometimes you give in to your lusts and your lower impulses. Like, do you trust yourself? Should other people trust you? Nobody is 100% trustworthy in every situation because other people have different agendas than you do. The elite just want more docile workers. You're proving your lack of value by insisting on your rights be recognized. Then work for yourself. Start your own business. If the elite just want more docile workers, they're not going to stay elite very long because there are all sorts of jobs that require the opposite of docility. So elite with the docile workers will not stay elite for long. Be the docile worker or the elite will be justified in replacing you with Jamal. How about you start your own business or go work for someone you love? I've had a lot of bosses that I love. So it's not like getting a job is inherently a miserable exercise. You don't have to hate those you manipulate and exterminate. No, you don't. You don't hate them. But if you hold that the elites hate us, then you're saying that we're powerful. You can't have both. You can't say that the elite hate us and that they're all powerful. You have to give up one or the other. All right? Because we only hate those who threaten us. What I'm hearing breaks my heart. Why? Why does it break your heart? I mean, there's no political, cultural, or religious opinion that you could have that would break my heart. I like Luke's intellectual bravado. He's fun, but often ridiculously wrong. I don't want their wealth. I don't want their power. I just want them to stop destroying my culture and importing replacements. So there's nothing that they have that you want. Like, if you don't want their power, then you are agreeing to them having the power. It's not like, oh, I don't want their power. I don't want their money. I just don't want them doing things that I don't like. Doesn't it work that way? All right? If you don't want them to do what they're doing, then you have to replace them with a different elite. Your side has to take the wealth and has to take the power. All right? You don't get to say, walk away from earthly power and at the same time rage about the decisions of those with earthly power. All right? If you don't like the decisions of those with power and money, then you need to work towards replacing them with a new elite who are more in accord with your values. I want them to stop pushing rainbow values on kids. I do too. It's loathsome. And that's why I support causes, and that's why I associate with groups who are opposed to this. Is it just me, or does Luke just not understand what it means to be an American? Tell me, what does it mean to be an American? So I have lived here most of the time since 1977, so I don't believe that America is an idea. So if you're saying I don't understand what it means to be an American, you are arguing that America is primarily an idea. America is not an idea. America is blood and soil. It's a nation and a state. It's a nation state developed by a particular people, largely from England, dominated by an Anglo-Saxon elite until about 60 years ago. So you apparently believe that America is an idea, because to understand what it means to be an American means that you understand American as believing in certain values. I don't understand American as believing in any certain set of values. So you buy the neoconservative line that America is an idea. I believe that America is a nation state. It's my nation state. I'm a citizen of this nation state. And so it's the greatest nation state in the world to me because I live here. Just because someone is an alcoholic, drug addict, self-hater, and envious loser doesn't mean that they are not right. Correct. I haven't made hardly any arguments that contradicting do the elite hate us and want us dead. Almost all my arguments have been that it's very unhealthy for you to believe this. It could entirely be true and also unhealthy. Now, I do think that there is a self-contradictory logical problem with the argument, do the elite hate us and want us dead, because we don't hate anyone. So you've got to give up one or the other. Either you've got to give up the belief that the elite hold the whip hand, or you've got to give up the belief that they hate us, because you can't hold both. Right? If the elite have the whip hand, then they cannot hate us because we're no threat. If the elite don't have the whip hand, then there's no reason to be concerned that they hate us, right? So this is self-contradictory thinking. If you hold that the elite hate us, then you're admitting that they don't have the power. Can you walk in a downtown of a city to look at beautiful statues and buildings while talking to rich people next to you without coming off as a creep? In certain situations, sure. I don't envy elites. I scorn them for their hatred of my countrymen. I don't envy Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, Les Wexner, Ehud Barak, Leon Black, Ronald Lauder, Jean-Luc Brunel networks. I just want them exposed. Okay, so you don't have envy. Why do they censor their subjects if they feel no threat? Well, all societies have censored. All. There's never been a society where you could say anything that you believe. Every society has made saying certain basic truths just socially unacceptable. But as for, say, why does YouTube censor? YouTube's a business. I think it's probably in their business interest to make it as advertiser friendly as possible. That means they don't want certain discussion of ideas. Also, pretty much everybody who dominates in big tech is left wing. And so I would assume that they pursue their values just like I pursue my values. Why are elites so anxious to destroy everything? I don't think they are. Do you think they want to destroy themselves? Do you think they want to destroy the sources of their wealth and power? Do you think they want to destroy everything that is valuable to them? Sheryl Sandberg, Mark Zuckerberg don't want to kill us. They just want to muzzle us. They don't want to muzzle you. They just, to the extent that they want to muzzle you, it's on their platform. Just like if you were a guest at my dinner party, there would be limits. You wouldn't get to say absolutely everything, right? You are a guest at Sheryl Sandberg's, Mark Zuckerberg's dinner party when you participate on Facebook. Not on Facebook. They don't care what you say. Elites can hate us and we can hate them. Yes, but is that productive? And it's also logically doesn't make sense. Why would elites hate you if they have all the power? Our opinions can be dismissed. Yeah, I think pretty much all people have vices. But do you see any difference between, the alcoholic who sleeps in the street and the other bloke who likes to watch, one football game a week? And otherwise he works a job, supports a family. Alexander the Great seemed to be pretty envious. Maybe. Madeleine Albright thought killing 500,000 children in Iraq was a price worth paying. She probably didn't hate them. She was just serving Rockefeller and neocon interest. I think she was just doing what she thought would be best in the long run for the Middle East and for American interests. Do you think Churchill lost sleep about how many Germans were getting killed by Allied bombing? Do you think Roosevelt lost sleep over how many Germans were getting killed by Allied bombing? Nobody cares about outgroups. There's nothing weird that Madeleine Albright doesn't care about the death of Iraqi children. Guess what? You don't care that much about the death of Iraqi children either. If you think that you care terribly much about the death of Iraqi children, you are delusional. You are enjoying conspicuous compassion. Wanting to be well governed is not envy. Now, you're not an alcoholic if you criticize elites, but if you go through life filled with envy and rage and hurt and a sense of victimhood and a sense that you have little ability to shape your own destiny, in all likelihood, you will wind up sunk in your own addictions. Can we contemplate how the power differential between elites and non-elites affect the duties owed between us? Well, if you're not elite, you don't have elite power. So you don't have to take on those responsibilities. All that you owe is, if you're a normal person, is to be a law-abiding citizen who looks after your family, contributes to your community, and pulls your weight. Elites are not your peers. They owe you duties that you don't know. What do elites owe you? What do elites owe people that they don't know? What do you owe people that you don't know? Aside from essentially abiding by the law and being a productive citizen. There's a social contract that grants them legitimacy and justifies their receiving the lion's share of the material benefit. Yes, so elites should behave in ways that minimize the incentives for other people to envy and hate them. So there are many things that you can do to reduce other people's envy of you. So I've got some notes here from Susan Fisk on that. So you can be modest, all right? If you're constantly boasting, then you are increasing the odds that other people will be envious of you. Okay, so why do we make constant comparisons? Essentially to get information, for self-defense, and for group identity. And so probably a low level of suspicion, concern, fear about outgroups probably can serve you because it provides clarity and it provides bonding with your in-group, and it kind of gives you identity. So a low level of suspicion, fear, distrust, and dislike of outgroups is probably adaptive. So we do need to continually make comparisons. The key, I think, is not to get stuck there in the emotions of envy and scorn. Okay, we make comparisons to seek information that will help us predict and control life outcomes. We seek information so that we can bond with our in-group, and we seek information and make comparisons so that we can be better prepared for the world around us. Now, we can turn envy in many instances into admiration and inspiration. And so we can find things to admire, be inspired by the people who started Google or the people who started Facebook or by people who write for the New Yorker. We can find things to admire, and we can use their success, the parts of it that we admire, to inspire ourselves. So take the envy, turn it into inspiration and admiration. Inspiration and admiration for the good that they do, not for the bad, obviously. Okay. So we can turn contempt and disgust into sympathy and pity when we see other people's perspective. We can recognize the humanity of others, and that will enable us to feel more virtuous, valuable, and secure. We can think about ourselves treating others as we would like to be treated in their place. How do we control our feelings of envy because they can be so corrosive? We can be self-reliant. We can commit to building our own kingdom, our own business, pursuing our own vision, our own dreams. We can choose not to spend time in envy. We can just write it off as not that important. Instead, we can concentrate on the things that we can control instead of obsess about the things over which we have no control. And we can bolster ourselves by giving ourselves credit for our own good qualities. We can look to our own goals. Maybe some of our goals or beliefs are inaccurate. Does a Corvette really make people happier? Or some of our goals or beliefs may be illogical or unsubstantiated. So we can change our core beliefs to allow a more adaptive and useful approach to life. We can acknowledge our limitations. I don't sing well. I suck at singing. No big deal. We can strive to improve in realistic ways. I'm never going to play in the National Football League. We can balance awareness of challenges we have with gratitude for the things that we do have. So we can always develop mastery. We can always develop skills. And we can always develop our gratitude for things we do have. We can shift time frames. We don't have to be stuck in the present. Instead of comparing ourselves with others, we can compare our progress with our past self, and we can look to where we want to go. Have we not improved over time? Is the future not promising? We can question authority, who says the other person really is better or happier, by what measure. Comparisons are always open to multiple interpretations. We can stop comparing our insides to other people's outsides. We can channel our anger. Maybe our comparisons are unfair. If the enviable person has illegitimate success, then most of us feel angry. Anger is much more mobilizing than envy, and anger and resentment can be channeled into our own accomplishment. And we can seek to control our own fate. If we have a chance to improve, we do it. Even if our rival's circumstances are better, we can develop our own mastery. Longing is envy's cousin. Benign envy wants to have what enviable others have, not to take it away from them. So longing, much more healthy than envy. We can use benign envy to motivate ourselves. Liking can transform envy into inspiration and admiration. We feel admiration when the distance between ourselves and other people is large. We not only identify with that person as a part of our team or tribe, but we wish the best for it. Acknowledging that relative status and competence differential between ourselves and envied others, we can still focus on our shared national, tribal, or religious loyalties and develop friendliness and trust with people in our in-group. If the distance is not too great, self-improvement may be possible. How do we act on our admiration? We can congratulate those who outcompete us. We can compliment another person and sincerely acknowledge that the other person is deserving, and that links our fates, and that allows us to be inspired. So we sit between two windows, and the most natural inclination is to look out one window and be filled with envy that other people have what we don't have and want to have. And we can look out the other window and be filled with scorn that those people don't matter, they don't count. But that blinds you to anything but your own reflection. Concentrating on the other makes you forget yourself as a target of either envy or scorn and attend to the other person's feelings. This kind of responsiveness in a relationship is a good thing. So we need to do what we can to cultivate responsiveness despite competition in our close relationships. And we can try to avoid comparisons. Partners and friends are reluctant to compare openly because it risks damage on both sides, whoever comes out on top or on bottom. So the concerned superior wants to spare the partner the public indignity and private humiliation, and the inferior wants to avoid those feelings. So we can take care not to needlessly put ourselves above those in our lives, because they are going to resent that. And the concerned inferior can spare the outperforming partner public envy and private guilt by instead concentrating on the shared relationship, or the shared, we're both Americans, or we're both Christians, or whatever we have in common. We can choose to concentrate on what we have in common. We can minimize status differences, so we can reduce our own showing off. We can live a modest life so we don't provoke envy and hatred in others. We can downplay any privileges or accomplishments that we have. We can explain away any differences between us and others as good luck. We can explain a success as a fluke, make the gap between us and others seem temporary. Success stories that offer external, unstable, and uncontrollable factors such as luck make the teller seem modest and admirable. Imputed arrogance comes from accounts that attribute success to internal, stable, uncontrollable, and desirable qualities such as innate intelligence. We can reduce the gap by lifting up the people around us. And we can mind the relationship by giving priority to our friendships and our relationships. And we can value other people around us. The main antidotes to envy and scorn are making other people feel secure and valued, because these social comparison emotions arise from uncertainty. We can praise and recognize other people. We can make them feel included and valued. If this soft diplomacy is seen as manipulative, it can backfire. So sincerity and plausibility are key.
And the heart just stops, not stops, but starts pumping weaker and weaker. They can end up in the intensive care unit. And then they get better. This huge outpouring of catecholamines from the stress from the brain can cause the heart to do that. It's well known. Can the mind cause death? We hope not. But people die from voodoo. Right? You can die from voodoo if you really believe in voodoo. Contagious. Can symptoms be contagious from one to another? Can pain be contagious? I've seen people who read an article about carpal tunnel and their hand starts hurting. And I can tell you lots of stories about the contagiousness of pain. I went to a big medical center
Okay,
last
we
year.
got
Pain,
Gandalf.
pain center.
Gandalf, long time. How are you, sir? Okay, hang on. Let me. Okay, could you say something again? I'm having a little trouble on my end.
Oh, can you hear me better
Yep,
now?
Yep. Okay, so I think I missed that. Could you tell me again what you've been doing? It's been, what, 4 months probably since we spoke?
Yeah, I've been, well, basically, I moved to a much happier, safer place.
Oh, great. And how's life?
Life is much better. Like, I'm able to relax a lot more when there's just a lot less of the constant tension of urban life. Like, I guess I kind of like urban living insofar as I love libraries and museums and promenades and parks and all that stuff. But in the COVID world, in this world of just general decay, it's no longer very pleasant, especially if, there are no parks open, there's no restaurants open, no gyms open. You can't go to work, you can't do anything. Cities are becoming kind of hellscapes. I mean, who knew that John Carpenter's 1982 film Escape from New York wouldn't be just a movie, but a documentary about what you should do with your life in 2020?
And are you out of the big city now?
I'm out, and other than to visit the library occasionally, that's still there. I don't do anything there anymore.
And what do you think about the 2020 election?
I think it's good that we're going to get a Biden presidency. I think it's very good. It's as I told people on Normie Book, it focuses the mind. I mean, Trump is a cope. It's, chlormph, blormph, whatever. I mean, yeah, he accomplished some things, most of which are fit within the universe of what, true conservative Republican types want. But, he was elected to be a populist. I mean, if you remember the 2016 campaign, I mean, what are the two chants of the crowds that you remember most, Luke, from 2016?
Lock her up.
And build that wall.
Yeah.
Was that wall built?
Yeah, about 500 miles.
Yeah, and it's crappy fencing. I want a wall like the kind of wall they have, in the Middle East, in Israel. I want a wall like that because Mexico is collapsing. It's a narco state. It's not really, increasingly the federales have less and less control over that territory. And, and it's also a symbol that this country does something to respect its sovereign territory. And lock her up. I mean, for heaven's sake, I mean, that woman's WikiLeaks was basically so many charges for treason that you could have docket after docket of cases against that woman, and have military tribunals go forever with as much treason as she committed, and nothing was done. Like, I get it on some level. Yes, the deep state. Maybe Trump couldn't, wouldn't, shouldn't, whatever, do anything. But that's not the point. The point is Trump awakened within people a desire for a certain sort of kingly archetype. People wanted daddy to come in and fix the broken society. And instead, Trump just bloviated a lot and didn't do the main things people wanted. People kind of wanted an end to just open-ended foreign wars all over the place. People wanted the borders shut. People wanted a return to high-quality, high-paying jobs where we actually make real shit. And we got maybe a little bit of a move in that direction, but not what people wanted. People wanted results. And I don't care about process anymore. We just need results and things to work. And Trump didn't deliver. And continuing to have faith in Trump was a cope. Now we're going back to the neoliberalism of yore. I mean, we're going to have a sort of, I hope, a tamping down of all that far left street BLM agitation. That seems to be in the cards. And we're going to go back to a dreary, encroaching sort of, especially in the cities, communist kind of government that supports a neoliberal globalist world order. Because conservative Americans are the problem. They want to conserve liberalism while their hearts want a king, and they don't connect their hearts with their minds. They want to. They're not rooted enough in what is going on and in what needs to be done. That's the issue.
Wait, did you say Hillary Clinton was obviously guilty of treason? What are you referring to?
Just all the stuff in her WikiLeaks. I mean, that was made public back in August 2016 or something like that.
Okay, there was just so much stuff that was made public on WikiLeaks. What had to do with treason? What was treasonous?
I mean, I forget some of it was referred to in the emails, but I mean, she sold a quarter of the country's uranium supply to Russia, which is a strategic resource, by the way, just for money for her damn foundation. That to me seems pretty treasonous. And yet we spent 4 years worrying about, Putin selecting Trump, was the conspiracy theory purported by the media and the left. And, that conspiracy theory had very little legs because the main document which supported was the Steele dossier, which was obviously a fraud.
Do you believe that voter fraud played a major role in the 2020 election?
A major role, but hard to say how big a role. I mean, we always knew there was going to be fraud, but, and Trump to some degree also expanded his base, but he didn't deepen it because, his main base of supporters, which was kind of disenfranchised, lower working class white males, I think didn't come out to vote for Trump, and they didn't vote for Biden either. So, Trump didn't deliver for the bloc, which put him ahead. His most passionate early supporters, he delivered almost nothing for. Instead, what are those people supposed to vote for? The Platinum Plan? I mean, come on.
Well, wages for the least educated Americans had the biggest gains in 50 years. They had the biggest gains of any of the wage earning groups. So there was a big payoff for people without a college education during the first 3 years of the Trump presidency until COVID.
Yeah, and that fourth year, all of those were lost and more because Trump was unwilling, unable, whatever, to stop the insanity of all the lockdowns. It's like on some level, politics at the level it's getting to now is purely about delivering results. And ordinary people can't take a lot more. Things are going to get really bad this winter, by the way. And so the slide's going to continue even further, especially once Biden becomes president. But Trump is a victim of rising expectations. He promised the world and delivered, a Trump steak.
And voter fraud, a lot of conversations about voter fraud since the election. How do you access accurate information on that?
I don't know if you can. I mean, we have the famous videos of all the poll workers in Atlanta, stuffing those ballot boxes underneath the tables in the counting rooms. I mean, it looks like, when they stopped the vote counting at the same time in 4 or 5 states and then restarted it at the same time, and all of a sudden, all the votes they found in between the stop time and the restart time were Biden votes. I mean, that seems pretty suspicious. I mean, there's no way in hell that a guy who is senile, whose running mate was the most hated Democratic candidate going into the cycle, there's no reason that those two people would somehow get over 80 million votes. That doesn't make any sense. But it also, there's a lot of actual legitimate Trump hatred on the left. The left was quite energized. So the election was very, very close, and it would always be close. I don't believe it was a huge landslide. Everyone was energized, but certainly the fraud probably put what was a tied election up in Biden's favor. But Trump wasn't prepared for this. Trump had the Kobach Commission on voter integrity, and he basically took a big shit on them and just abandoned them. I mean, every major ally Trump has had, he's shown no loyalty to. Trump has never been about cultivating loyalty because his prima donna narcissism is just so over the top. I mean, what's so sad is, Trump is brilliant at playing the media game. He's brilliant at marketing and branding. And in some sense, he kind of exposed the media and tech world for being essentially organs of left-wing globalist propaganda. But he was unable to figure out a way to consolidate power once he was in office to do anything other than be just sort of a disruptor of narratives. And that ultimately is what doomed him. And I don't feel anything for him. And if people are still holding on to Trump copes, I kind of don't have anything to say to them anymore. This country is coming to an end. It's pretty much over. And we have to accept that, and accept that conservatives are just playing, let's not have too much liberal left-wing stuff too fast. And they never have turned back the clock on anything. And they don't want to be responsible for turning back the clock. I mean, when you went to like those, was it CPAC, and they had some transgender lady MAGA thing, and they think that, and that's somehow like based and stuff. I mean, hearing conservatives talk like that, I'm like, just 4 or 5 years ago, they were like fighting against gay marriage. I mean, what is wrong with conservatives? Are they just fat, beaten down with Stockholm syndrome? I mean, I think our biggest problem in America isn't the left. It might be conservatives that refuse to realize that if you really want to conserve a society, you need God and King. You cannot rely on elections and voting and appealing to NPCs. You need a core of people who really care about the core culture and core groups of a nation, that by dint of the incentives they have as rulers, and a monarch has the incentives to care about for his population within a given territory, that we need those kind of people if we want to really conserve society. We got to end this fiction of just liberal politics and elections and democracy. I mean, this has clearly failed. And to believe that, let's wait till the next election when, hell, who knows if the next election is going to be stolen. To play this game is just, it's a fool's errand. And it's time to, let's go God and King. I mean, I'm kind of at the point where if you're not a monarchist, you're not serious about politics, and you're not serious about preserving something of what's left of heritage America.
Well, which countries do you see as providing a good monarchical model?
Well, I think about this quite a bit. Right now, obviously there aren't any monarchies extant in the world right now that are a good example. But if you look in the European past, I think the best way to go forward would be something like the Holy Roman Empire. I mean, granted, you had a diet, which was representative of all the princes of all the little duchies and principalities within that huge territory. I mean, there was lots of local autonomy for those princes, for the princes and duchies, but you also had, and they mostly elected members of the same clan, the Hohenzollerns. But the king was elected, though. It wasn't just automatically passed down by birth. Hereditary monarchies, at least in the Christian era in Europe, have tended toward degeneracy over time. I mean, it's better to have an elected monarchy. But in my world, because I think we need a serious return to God and to holy and divine things, I think we need I think we need to reverse engineer it. I think European monarchies failed because they failed to follow, I think, proper priestcraft, and we need to. I think if you do a reverse engineering of it, we'll discover that the church and the heresy of Christianity prevented our kings from ruling effectively. And the diet that will choose my king under a neo-Holy Roman Empire, assuming such a thing arose in, say, North America, the diet would be made of Brahmins, because the king has to be someone who provides a light and example to the masses and the laity. And I think that's the way forward. I dream of a day where a mass suffrage election is a thing that we laugh at as an error of a few centuries of liberal insanity.
And have you been watching The Crown on Netflix?
Actually, I haven't. I should, but a part of me has just avoided it because I absolutely fucking hate the British monarchy. I just despise them. I mean, they've been basically a constitutional monarchy, which is a terrible form of government, ever since the end of the Cromwell Revolution, and they've been cucking to Parliament. So gradually, they've ceded more and more power. They don't really seem to care about the English people right now. I mean, the current monarch is terrible. And and Prince Andrew is essentially a pedophile. So, I mean, that royal family is just beyond helping.
Sorry, you were going to say something?
Well, I'm just saying, it's like, if under my kind of system where Brahmins had to choose the king or the queen, if a monarchical family behaves as degenerately as the House of Windsor, they'd be deposed. And it's far easier, especially when you have Brahmins checking the power of the king, to depose a king than, for the masses of the lords to depose a king, much less to overthrow a democracy with the centers of power are just so, decentralized, and people can fight over assholes and elephants. That's my term for, Democrats and Republicans. So, I think we have to understand that very few people have the capability of ruling. The problems we face just as a complicated world civilization and as a major component of it are just so difficult that, we just can't have the three M's, the money, the media, and the masses, have any say in how the society is governed, because they've manifestly failed.
And have you been reading any good books lately?
Oh, I haven't had anything too good. I mean, the latest thing I've been reading, because we've been discussing with some people the Gospel of John, is Rudolf Bultmann's The Gospel of John.
Mm-hmm.
And every time I really read more about Christianity, I just despise that religion more and more. I think Christianity is the cause of most of the West's real problems, because it's a foreign religion. It basically threw out any remaining sort of scientific basis for trying to understand the universe, and instead imposed this mishmash of Hellenism and Judaism in a very confusing array that makes no sense. Did you, by any chance, catch the debate between Christopher John Bjerknes and E. Michael Jones, or has that been a discussion?
Yeah, about 15 minutes of it. So what did you think?
Well, it was remarkable. About 32, 33 minutes in, I was talking with Church of Entropy offline about this, actually. E. Michael Jones creates this whole sort of cult of logos. I mean, everything is logos. I'm starting to realize that he overcodes his entire philosophy with his own sort of idol of logos. But, Christopher John Bjerknes pointed out to him that, no, if you read in Greek, the first verse of Gospel of John, it literally says logos was theos. And so, and E. Michael Jones just was in total denial about it. It's like E. Michael Jones doesn't even read or understand the Bible that is supposedly the basis for his beliefs, but he just imports what he thinks is his version of sort of Greco-Roman philosophy on top of it, and just totally ignores all of this sort of Judaic first century underpinning to all of this, to his religion. And so it discredits the whole project. I mean, I think it's time to ditch Christianity. We've had 2,000 years of the Piscean Age, and hopefully the Piscean Age is about over, and this religious heresy can be put to bed.
And Church of Entropy says that she taught you how to reconcile quantum mechanics with Platonism. Is there anything to that?
Well, the key is that you can probably look and see that the monad, because there's the idea of the monad goes back to like probably Pythagoras, is that the monad, there's, if you can kind of sort of, the key to all of Greek philosophy might be in this kind of transitive statement. Church of Entropy says the monad creates the demiurge, and the demiurge reveals the monad, and in so doing, it's like this shows that the pure. I'm trying to make sure I explain this exactly right. That the pure form realm envelops the material realm, pervades it, yet is not within it, and this is the observer effect. And that's kind of, and the monad is kind of revealed to the demiurge in that way. And I'm kind of still playing that with that in my head, what that means. But Jen has given me, or Church of Entropy has given me the architecture to look at it. And, she sent me a copy of a poem from, I believe, Pythagoras. And it's like, oh my God, it's like, I'm thinking of a unified field model too. And just every time I think about it, my brain just hurts, because it's like, I think we have sort of a way to like look at all of Greek philosophy in a totally new way. I almost know she's right, and I haven't quite put it all together myself, but it's pretty mind blowing.
How would you describe Church of Entropy for someone who's never heard of her?
Cool as fuck. Yeah. I mean, she's just a cool gal. I mean, she's like the person you can nerd out with. And then once you've nerded out with her, you can nerd out again, and then you nerd yourself out into another galaxy, but feel like you're right at home, because you all of a sudden kind of look at the reality right in front of you in a new way. I mean, she's probably one of the coolest people I've come into contact with. I've probably learned more from her in the last year or two than I have from pretty much anybody else. I mean, I think people that treat her badly, I just like, how stupid are you? People should just listen to what the hell she has to say, because when I look back at some of the stuff she's told me a while back and how things have kind of evolved over time, it's uncanny how right she is on so many complicated issues. I thought I was smart. She's one of the few people, and I mean this as a compliment, who makes me feel dumb, and I'm just okay with it, because I learn a hell of a lot, and there's nothing more that I love in this world than just learning.
And how often do you live stream with her?
We haven't done any chill streams in a while, but I've been the last month or so since I've kind of gotten settled in a new place. I think I've been on the last 4 or 5 weekend reviews, and weekend review on Sunday night basically is you place church, the Christian church for me. I think it's almost like a religious experience. It's a place to celebrate what's going on just in general in the streaming world in the past week. It's a chance to hear Duvid, and I think Duvid is just, Duvid's just a character in his own right. I mean, there is no other Duvid. I mean, Duvid's like his own archetype. I mean, I don't care what anyone says. I've never met anyone quite like him. I mean, he kind of shatters all things, but the interplay between Duvid and Church of Entropy is just fun. And, we learn a lot of science. I mean, she was kind of the physics teacher I wish I had, but never could.
And any topics over the past few weeks that you've participated in discussing on Weekend Review that come to mind?
Oh, anything cool? it's very interesting just seeing how well I'll note this trend. It's not a particular topic, but it's very interesting that a lot of the themes Church of Entropy was talking about on her own blog 3 or 4 years ago, which many of her silly critics won't even read. That a lot of those issues about like consciousness, quantum computing, and whatnot seem to now dominate all the physics blogs. I mean, this. I think we're probably going to talk about it on a Week in Review. But there was an article that showed up just, I believe, today or yesterday in theconversation.com. And it says the fragments of energy, not waves or particles, may be the fundamental building blocks of the universe. And this is like December 2020. And it's like it almost feels like when you read this article, it's plagiarizing the Church of Entropy blog from maybe, I don't know, 3 years ago. Like, it's pretty remarkable. I mean, she's cool. She's remarkable. The people that hate on her, they're destroying their own credibility on some level. They should just sit down, shut up, and learn. Because she proves her points to me, and I ask her to have questions. She's willing. She's always, if you're respectful to her and you ask questions, you show an interest in wanting to learn, she proves her points. I'm not someone who just generally follows somebody just because, they tell me they're right and they're right. It's like, they got to prove it. They got to show it. I'm a very skeptical person most of the time. And I don't know. She's exceeded some of my expectations for that. And I can't really say that about too many people, if any people. So I don't know. I really love that gal. She's awesome. And people that hate on her, well, your loss.
Okay, great. Any other topics that you'd like to hit before I move on?
Well, before you move on, with the Supreme Court loss yesterday, how are you feeling, and what are you thinking about it? I'm sorry I've missed your show quite a bit. I feel bad. But what's the sense you get with the Supreme Court refusing to hear the Texas lawsuit?
Yeah, I've been sure since less than a week after the election that Joe Biden would become president. And I think anyone who said otherwise is either ill-informed or grifting. So it's obvious very, very shortly after the election that Trump had no chance, no case. His legal fights have been absolutely pathetic. Like the arguments that they put forward, the typos, the bollocksed up statistics, the deranged quality of his legal team, the haphazard, flying by the seat of his pants, completely unplanned Trump team fight has just been Trump at his absolute worst. And I'm not glad that Joe Biden is the president, but I recognize Ann Coulter, and I understand where she's coming from, and that she is glad that Biden is going to be the next president, because Trump, for some of the good things he's done, he's also incredibly childish, just lazy, does not want to plan anything. And you can see that in the completely unplanned nature of his election appeals, just so slipshod, so shoddy. And the people who thought that the Texas appeal had some legitimacy, they're either completely ignorant on the topic, or they're just incredibly delusional because they have certain emotional reactions. I mean, Jean-Francois Garapi is part of this movement. He did a show a few days ago, Major Texas Lawsuit, this is the one. No, it's not the one. It was never going to accomplish anything. And it seems like almost everyone on the distant right has wanted to claim that the election was stolen by major voter fraud, but they can't put together any evidence. And most of the evidence that they do put forward gets debunked fairly easily. And to me, it's just obvious Joe Biden is 2 points more popular than Hillary Clinton. That if Trump had run against Joe Biden in 2016, he would have lost. And it's not at all surprising that Joe Biden and the Democrats got such a high turnout this time around? Because they got an enormous turnout in 2018. The midterms got an enormous turnout because throughout the Trump presidency, Trump's approval ratings have averaged about 44%, and his disapproval ratings have averaged about 53%. And so a massive Joe Biden popular vote victory, I mean, that was absolutely assured. I mean, there was very little rational reason now looking back on it, just looking at Trump's low approval ratings, to think that he could win this election. And so, yeah, I think Biden will absolutely be the president. As long as the Republicans hold the Senate, Biden's not going to be able to accomplish much. And I think the world's coming to an end. I'm not sure that 2020 was the most important election of all time. I'm not sure it'll have that much effect on most people's real lives. And now all these either emotionally overcome or just idiots who have been trying to make the case for massive voter fraud and saying that this Texas lawsuit, this is the one. Maybe people can now tune them out, because it's virtually most of the distant right sphere have just been incredibly ill-informed on the mechanics of voter fraud, and they're amazed that Biden won when he's a little more popular than Hillary Clinton. So now in retrospect, it's not so hard to see that, given the enormous turnout that there were for the 2018 midterms, where the Democrats made major gains. It's not at all surprising that there was such an enormous turnout in 2020. Okay, you have.
Is it so much that Biden was more popular, or that anti-Trumpers are much more motivated?
Oh, it's not that nobody loves Joe Biden, but he is 2 points more popular than Hillary Clinton. So, I mean, people would prefer to vote for him than Hillary. But overall, this has nothing to do with Joe Biden. This is the majority of voting Americans hate Donald Trump. And it was clear in the 2018 midterm elections, and nothing Trump did since then had even a prayer of a chance of changing that dynamic, apparently.
I'm interested, because I haven't heard you in such a while. I mean, looking into your crystal ball, now that I think we've reached, and once we reach the Electoral College, we'll really get it. Look into your crystal ball. I mean, I think the Republicans are going to hold on the Senate, because divided government seems to work better for the elites. That's just my own guess in Georgia. I think they've made deals to the effect behind the scenes. But what do you suppose is going to happen during the Biden presidency? What does Luke see in his crystal ball? And I'll tell you what I see in mine afterwards, and see where we agree or disagree.
Well, I don't think he's going to be able to pass any major legislation. I mean, Donald Trump wasn't able to pass any major legislation either. Like, Trump completely failed to build out his base. He completely failed to pass any meaningful legislation. I don't think Biden will be able to pass any legislation. He'll do a lot of executive orders overturning Trump's executive orders. So I think we'll just get 4 more years of the Obama presidency. So that's what I anticipate. No major legislation passed by the Democrats.
I think that's the case, but I think what you have on, it's interesting that Rush Limbaugh a couple days ago got in big trouble because he was actually talking about secession and balkanization on his radio show for about 20 minutes or so. I didn't hear the clips, but I heard lots of people talking about it. I mean, in my spheres, where I just pay attention to, what people say on American Thinker or Breitbart or all these other things, I mean, the number of people on the right that seem much more angry than I can remember in a long time. I mean, perception is reality in American politics at this point. I mean, for 4 years, Democrats believed Trump was a Russian agent. I mean, now you have all these Republicans believing that Biden stole the election with mail-in ballots and Dominion voting machines and whatnot. I think what you are going to have is the gridlock that you saw maybe really start to take shape maybe when the Tea Party won in 2010. The gridlock you're going to see now is going to be much, much, much greater. I mean, I doubt that even Congress will be able to even come close to passing a budget. I think you might see something where a government shutdown happens simply because Congress can't function, and Joe Biden does something like, passes the budget right out of the White House. I think you could see something that crazy happen, because Congress's dysfunction is only going to grow. It's going to be a wild time. I think the media is really going to suffer under the Biden presidency. I think, CNN gets, 200,000 views or some very small number for some of their big shows. I mean, it could be that almost nobody watches CNN because no one wants to hear Joe Biden mumble through a sentence that he can't understand because of his Alzheimer's, or hear the screeching, cackling sound of Kamala Harris's voice. I mean, it's going to be, the media is going to die, or at least the mainstream media is going to die because no one's going to care. See, at least one of the positive things Trump did was he made people care about politics, although, should the masses care about politics? Probably not. But, given the circumstances, it's good that people are at least paying attention and at least caring, because the system is pretty rotten anyway. And under a Biden presidency, I think you're going to see all these people not care. And that's going to be a very weird, bizarro world. Because if all the Republicans believing things have been stolen from them, the Democrats are going to be terribly let down. I mean, Joe Biden was caught on a leaked audio hot mic telling BLM leaders to pipe down. We don't give a crap about you. So it's going to be a very dreary, dark 4 years. I mean, my question to you is, what do you think is going to happen in all these cities if they keep these lockdowns going on? I mean, I think in the near term, that's a big wild card.
Oh, so I think the vaccine is going to change life in America back to normal much more quickly than anticipated. So I would expect by June that we will be 80% plus back to normal. So we'll have a difficult couple of months, but now that the vaccine's rolling out, I think we can all see the light at the end of the tunnel, and I think in 6 months we'll be largely back to normal.
Are you going to take that vaccine?
Absolutely. I'd take it today if I could.
Oh, I'm the exact opposite. I'm not touching it with a 10-foot pole. I mean, they've rushed through the process. I have, based on all the lies and contradictions and the way they've handled the public health information, I have zero reason to trust these people to get me a vaccine. And it's not a vaccine that is done by, giving a dead or slightly weakened version of the original virus. It operates by changing your mRNA. And you know what mRNA is, right?
A little bit.
It's a message. Okay, basically DNA in the cells doesn't directly code the forming of proteins. DNA relies on messenger RNA to deliver that information from the nucleus of the cell to the ribosomes so the proteins are made and folded. Well, the Pfizer vaccine, the mRNA vaccine, messes with that process. No vaccine in history has ever done that, as far as I know, because vaccines rely upon preparing your body to fight a weakened form of a virus. So, anything which messes with someone's DNA needs to be watched very carefully. I mean, I remember all the problems that showed up with, say, genetically modified foods, which I think caused a lot more health problems than we think when they were introduced, I believe in 1994, 1995, when they first genetically modified the tomato. So I think we're playing with fire. I mean, yes, people die from COVID. No, it's not technically a flu virus, but it kills about as many people as the flu. I mean, in my belief, I think this whole panic and this mass hysteria is designed, and you're going to start to see this happen, is that they're planning on instituting, in a way to buttress the neoliberal order and to suppress the population, what I call hashtag MACT, medicalized anarcho-communist tyranny. I think that's the plan. I think the lockdowns are going to continue until they destroy the middle class and what's left of the middle class that owns businesses. There is no plan, as far as I can see, from the Democratic Congress. I mean, maybe I'm wrong and haven't followed all the news, to give people any sort of relief from the lockdowns. Because if you're locked down, can't go to work, how are people supposed to eat? I think you're going to see some. I mean, I don't predict like civil war or lots of violence, but you're going to see a lot of impoverishment and suffering in the cities. I mean, I'm just looking at the landscape and what appears to be on the horizon, and I don't really see a lot to the contrary. I think the end of the small business owning middle class is nigh, particularly in the urban centers. I think it's about over, and a lot of people are going to be, on bread lines, struggling to eat. This depression was totally unavoidable, but it looks like the Andrew Cuomo's and Bill de Blasio's and Gretchen Whitmer's and Lori Lightfoot's of the world are intending to destroy their own cities and destroy their own middle classes. So we're going to see at the end of Biden's term a much poorer America, insane amounts of violence in the cities. I mean, already in New York City, the New York Post did a story that 90% of people arrested on gun crimes this year were re-released back into the general public because of COVID, supposedly. I mean, so America will have a lot of problems. I see this society, the pace of decline, which had stepped up with each successive term of each successive administration, is going to ramp up considerably. I mean, things will go back to normal insofar as Washington operates with, gridlock as normal. In fact, maybe gridlock that's super normal, for lack of a better term. But the middle class in America is done. We're becoming a second, if not third world country, and the Biden presidency will lock in the end of America. Besides, America's status as a reserve currency is probably under some threat. Yes, the Navy's still policing the sea lanes, and all of that will sort of keep the charade going. But, the NASDAQ crash is probably baked into the cake. Church of Entropy did a great article on that, by the way. Check her blog out. I'm sure she'll post it, or someone will post it in the link in the chat. That's going to happen. I mean, if we have any violence, it won't be because, violence over political parties or violence over race or anything like that. It's going to be violence because people are actually can't eat and have to rob for their food or some crazy stuff like that. And that's really my great fear, even just over the winter and stuff like that. Like, going to big cities or living in big cities, if you haven't gotten out, get the hell out now. There is no future for a lot of these places.
I was surprised after Trump's victory how many very smart, highly accomplished, successful people believed that Russia had changed votes in voting machines, that they'd hijacked the election. I mean, when the New York Times, the Washington Post wrote about that they didn't say anything that ridiculous, but people took away from it that Russian hackers had essentially gone into America's voting machines and changed votes from Hillary Clinton to Donald Trump. I mean, that's what they're talking about. I don't know if that was just insane rage or it just seemed incredibly stupid. So if Republicans have a lot of rage too, then I can't blame them. I mean, they're just going to pay back the Democrats. So the Democrats said for 4 years that Donald Trump is not a legitimate president. So the Republicans are simply going to respond in turn and take the attitude that Joe Biden's not a legitimate president. And on a literal level, I think both accusations are absurd, but I understand the rage.
Yeah, it's like, why are people so enraged?
Well, Republicans, primarily because, wow, why are people so enraged? Because we have less in common with our fellow Americans. I think that's a major part, and change has been so rapid away from the traditional American way of life that it's left half the country scared to death. And then the reaction to that rapid change with Donald Trump has left much of the country scared to death as well. So,
I mean, I personally, like if there is no sort of bolt from the blue that turns things around, I mean, I seriously don't think that America as a political entity of 50 states united under some sort of federal system based in Washington, D.C., the District of Columbia, I don't think it survives to the 2030s. Because if every election is the end of the world and half the country thinks the other half is just going to straight out and out murder them, one half thinks one half thinks the Republicans are going to impose fascism, while the other half thinks the Democrats are going to impose communism, although the latter seems more likely than the former. Society can't go on that way. And there's really, what's the purpose of being an American anymore? What do I have in common with other quote unquote Americans anymore? If someone, say, like, I don't know, an Ilhan Omar, who thinks I belong on a list because I don't like her, and she promotes, a pretty savage foreign desert cult, that a person like that who thinks, and by the way, I have family that originally comes from Minnesota, by the way, so it's personal when she says stuff like that. If she gets to represent places where my family used to dwell, and she would place my descendants on her list when she's a member of a religion which has basically enslaved and killed people like me for most of its history, if that's American, take it and shove it.
okay, that's probably a good place to wind things up. Good to talk to you, Gandalf.
All right. Thanks, Luke. It's a pleasure to see you. Hopefully, I'll see more of you soon. I'm glad you're enjoying your post YouTube life, and I'll make sure to listen to more of your program, and we'll have some more substantive and organized conversations real soon. Okay?
Okay, sounds good, man. Take care.
Take care.
I said, pain
Bye-bye.
can be contagious. They looked at me like I was crazy. Because their view of pain is it's a static process caused by a structural abnormality in the brain. And that can happen. But there's another form of pain. That's a mind-body pain. That is incredibly common. Can the brain cause hallucinations? Oliver Sacks wrote a whole book about hallucinations and how common they are in normal people. Have you ever, this is the most common hallucination in modern life, have you ever had the sensation that your cell phone was vibrating in your pocket, and when you looked at it, it wasn't? I've had that. It's pretty common. It's amazing. I think someone's calling me right now. And so the mind is powerful enough to cause symptoms that are caused by stress. This is a guy published in the British Medical Journal. I don't know if you can see. This is a nail going through his boot. He jumped off a scaffolding in 1995 and had tremendous pain, off the charts, screaming and writhing all the way to the hospital. They gave him IV narcotics, IV sedation, didn't touch his pain. They ripped his boot off, and they found the nail right between his toes. No injury. Severe pain. One of the first things.
So I think that's a great example of how flawed our perceptions can be. Like this guy is screaming in pain for a nail that goes between his toes, doesn't even injure him. So we don't see the world as it is, we see the world as we are. There's a comment in the chat that Rush Limbaugh had endorsed secession. No such thing. Rush Limbaugh said we may be headed towards secession. He didn't endorse secession. He didn't promote civil war. He just noted the forces of secession operating in the country around him.
Things that we do is try to figure out what's causing the pain. But that's been done. All my patients have been to medical testing, medical workups, medical treatment, have been to the Mayo Clinic and the Cleveland Clinic, have been all over the place to try to find the cause, the medical cause. Just operate on me, just do something. But when you get to the point of chronic pain treatment, what we end up saying is chronic pain is a disease state, and we will help you cope with it. But chances are we're not going to make it just disappear.
And I'm just scrolling through the chat. Do I think Republicans will retain control of the U.S. Senate? I do. There's a comment here. The lockdowns were a tool to give Joe Biden a win. I think that's overstating it. Like, look at the massive turnout for the 2018 midterms, which the Democrats did really well with. there was always going to be a massive turnout for the 2020 election, and Donald Trump has never expanded his base. He's long tended to have an approval rating that is lower than that which gets you reelected. It'll be interesting to see Joe Biden become more senile during his presidency, while the left will try to cover it up till maybe they can't hide it anymore, and you may have President Kamala Harris. I think neither Joe Biden nor Kamala Harris will be popular. So I don't think they're going to have any surge of support. Therefore, they're not going to be able to pass, I anticipate, any significant legislation. And I think maybe in 2024, Republicans will nominate someone who has a platform similar to Trumpism, meaning immigration restriction and trade protectionism, but who's much more competent at governing than Donald Trump.
We don't have magic. And so we do multimodal treatment, which makes perfect sense. Let's try a lot of different things.
So we spend trillions of dollars on multimodal treatment for chronic pain. And much of it's useless. Much of it doesn't have an effect better than placebo. So there are countries, for example, that don't even have whiplash. Right? That's not even a thing. But where if we had this explosion in chronic pain over the past few decades, one is it's a way to get on disability, and two, it is contagious. Like if the people that you're working with or living around are coming down with carpal tunnel syndrome or whiplash, then you're much more likely to experience those symptoms. If you simply read an article on carpal tunnel syndrome, you're very likely to start experiencing the symptoms. When we used to type on typewriters, much more taxing and demanding than typing on a computer keyboard, we never had carpal tunnel syndrome. Now we have an explosion of carpal tunnel syndrome.
So, surgery for back pain. Well, when you do research and compare fusion back surgery versus cognitive therapy and exercises, there's no difference. When you do early discectomy versus waiting and no surgery, over time, there's no difference. So there's 5 studies for back pain surgery that show that surgery is not better than non-surgical treatments for low back pain. That doesn't mean it doesn't.
Okay, I don't believe we're going to have secession. So I know it's widely talked about. People get very excited about it, the coming civil war. It's guaranteed to get lots of clicks. I think there's absolutely no chance. Most people don't care about politics as much as you and I do. All right? Most people just live their lives and they pay a little attention to politics. So most people get along reasonably well with people of a different political party, and they don't think about politics all the time. Right? If one is obsessed with politics, unless one is earning their living from it, or it's just a healthy hobby, then it's most likely a coping mechanism. It's a distraction from gaping wounds in one's own life. But rather than paying attention to one's failures at work, or one's failures in one's love life, or one's lack of friendships, or rather than devoting attention to, say, one's low standing in one's community, it's much easier to distract yourself with drugs or with alcohol or with pornography or with obsession about politics. But politics doesn't really have that much of an impact on our daily lives. The Joe Biden presidency versus the Donald Trump presidency is not going to dramatically affect the way most Americans live their lives. And so obsession with politics, in most instances, I think it's a maladaptive coping mechanism to distract oneself from what really matters in life. It's a way of avoiding coming to terms with, say, some very painful things in one's own life.
Doesn't work. Because you see, people are getting better with both. It's not to say surgery doesn't work. It's to say surgery isn't working better than the non-surgical treatments, if you see what I mean. Why do we keep doing surgery? Because it works. People get better. Not everyone, of course. How about radicular pain? Bulging disc, herniated disc, pain shooting down the leg. Surgery would work pretty well for that, you would think. The biggest trial, sport trial, almost 300 people, randomized controlled trial. When you do the intention to treat analysis, which is the most conservative way of doing the analysis, surgery wasn't better than non-surgical approaches. So there's a guy in Los Angeles in the early 90s who decided for some reason to look at his surgical patients for back pain. And they all needed surgery for back pain because he wouldn't have done surgery if they didn't need surgery for back pain. They had abnormalities on.
So the reason I'm playing this on a political show is just imagine this guy's right. Right. So most everything we're told about back pain, neck pain, head pain, whiplash, carpal tunnel syndrome, chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, let's just grant that he might be right. To me, that's kind of indicative to most of the stuff we talk about in politics. It's not important. Most of the stuff in the news is not important. Remember, for 3 years, the news media was fixated over Trump's purported collusion with Putin and Russia, which was bogus. So much of the stuff in the news is not important. It does not reflect what truly matters in life. We're spending trillions of dollars on what may be completely ineffective treatments for pain which is primarily caused perhaps by unconscious rage, by the body distracting ourselves from unpleasant thoughts that are about to become conscious. And so rather than dealing with painful realities, we prefer to get distracted by, oh, my back hurts, or let's get distracted over voter fraud, or let's get distracted by tonight's UCLA-USC game. I remember in February 1988, I kept getting the very unwanted thought as I was working very hard at school and at work. I was thinking, I'm either going to break through to greatness or I'm going to break down. Either way, I'm going to get the love that I need. And shortly thereafter, I collapsed into 6 years of largely bedridden chronic fatigue syndrome. And so for me, I experienced something that felt very real, like a very real physical collapse, very real symptoms that one day I could go run 3 miles. And then after I got sick, if I tried to do anything like that, I'd get really, really sick. And the symptoms have seemed very real to me in the 30 years since then. That not nearly as physically strong as I was before the illness, but I need to ask myself, like, what could be the possible payoff for me of having chronic fatigue syndrome? Like, maybe I was locked into an exhausting way of living my life. Maybe I was locked into just overdoing things to try to overachieve, and maybe chronic fatigue syndrome or this collapse was a way for me to break out of being locked into a cycle where I just worked all the time and studied all the time and just pushed myself to the max. What was the payoff for me? Like, very unpleasant question, but maybe these are things that, like, my conscious mind has absolutely no interest in thinking about. But most of the things we think about, we're not even conscious of. And so there may be a great deal going on under the surface, which is driving us. And we use all sorts of things to distract ourselves from what is most important in life. And I think that's also true of the news. Most of the news doesn't matter very much. What's truly important is usually not on the news.
On their backs and their MRIs. And he said, well, some people don't do as well as others. So he did a little analysis and he asked them 5 questions. Did your parents divorce, or were you abandoned or neglected as a child? Was either your parents abusing drugs or alcohol? Did you have physical abuse? Did you have sexual abuse? Did you have emotional abuse? So 5 measures of childhood adversity. And then he looked at his outcomes. Those who had none of the childhood adversity, 95% of them did great with surgery. Those who had 1 or 2 of these risk factors, 73% did great with surgery. Those who had 3 or more of these childhood risk factors had a 15% success rate with back surgery. And it makes you wonder, is it something other than the back that we may be dealing with in these patients?
So I think what I'm saying here is the very opposite of nihilism. Nihilism is getting all obsessed over things which you have zero control over and probably aren't particularly well informed about, right? Getting obsessed over national politics, which you have no control over, that's incredibly nihilistic. You will make 0 difference to deciding who the next president of the United States will be. You will not affect national politics. So obsessing over things or spending a great deal of time and attention on things over which you have no influence, that to me seems incredibly nihilistic. But where do you have an influence? You have an influence with how you spend your time. You have an influence with who you choose to associate with. You have influence over what type of work that you do, what kind of skills you develop, whether you marry and have children, whether you develop your standing with your community, with your educational community, whether you move ahead in your profession, whether you get into good shape, whether you get sober, whether you stop gambling or not, whether you start to lead a productive life, whether you choose to volunteer a few hours a week, maybe visit an old folks' home or become a big brother. That's where you can make a genuine difference in the world. All right. So to me, making a genuine difference in one's own life and in the lives around you, that to me is the very opposite of nihilism. And spending a great deal of time thinking about things over which you have zero control, to me, that is losing in life. To me, that is nihilistic. Because most of the news is simply a distraction. It doesn't really tell you what's important. It tells you what grabs eyeballs. So think about everyone on the distant right, all the live streamers and the bloggers and the tweeters and the podcasters. They've all been feeding you bogus lines about massive voter fraud swinging the 2020 election to Joe Biden. Right? They've just been telling you lies, either because they're too stupid, they're too ill-informed, or they're just so emotionally caught up that they can't handle reality. Right? So participating in what's almost universal in the distant right, in these delusional claims about voter fraud, and willfully participating in this mass hysteria, this mass delusion, like you have a choice of doing that, right? Obviously I can't stop you, and almost every live streamer on the distant right is participating in that, but it's completely absurd. There never was a strong case that the 2020 election was decided by voter fraud, and yet pretty much everyone on our side is all up in arms. They choose to be hysterical. They choose to have these delusions. They choose to distract themselves from reality, believing all sorts of things for which there is no evidence, and so that they can fire up their own hatred and envy and disgust, and so they can get this biochemical rush that comes when one feels hysterical.
Cruz, who's supposedly a legal genius, who wants to argue this case because he believes it has such merit.
He has proven himself to be neither a genius in the law or a genius, frankly, in terms of an EQ. He is a sad sack. And I would say to him, and frankly, I'd say to my 17 colleagues who have gone along with this circus, I don't know if I need to send you a surgeon to examine your spine or a psychiatrist to examine your head, but something's wrong with you if you continue to follow this president, if you continue to behave in these bizarro ways, if you continue to hold yourself out as a legal expert, yet demonstrate day in and day out with your support of this president and his claims that you don't know anything about the law, either the process or the facts that go into a winning lawsuit. This president will continue to lose in court. And I believe anyone who sides with him, Ted Cruz or anyone else, will continue to lose as well.
Okay, so it might be an effective tactic. All right, whether it's true or not, it can still be an effective tactic. So I understand that. But do you really want to live in delusion? CNN, each of the 4 battleground states targeted by a Texas lawsuit seeking to overturn President Donald Trump's election defeat issued blistering briefs at the Supreme Court Thursday, with Pennsylvania officials calling the effort a seditious abuse of the judicial process. Pennsylvania Attorney General Josh Shapiro, Texas' effort to get this court to pick the next president has no basis in law or fact. The court should not abide this seditious abuse of the judicial process, should send a clear, unmistakable signal that such abuse must never be replicated. Right, so 17 state attorney generals, about 130 members of Congress, and other people signed on for this, and it was absurd. The Texas lawsuit was just horrible. Andrew Gelman blogs, the statistical errors involved are pretty bad. They're common in published scientific articles, but mistakes that seem recondite and technical in a paper on beauty and sex ratio become much clearer when the topic is something familiar such as voting. Rejecting an empty null hypothesis is often an empty exercise, but it's obviously empty when the hypothesis is that votes at different times are random samples for a common population. This sort of thing might get you featured in Freakonomics and NPR, but it has no place in serious decision making. Statistics is hard, so you can't blame people, even a Williams College math professor or former program directors at Harvard, for getting things wrong. I'd like to blame these people for being so clueless as to not realize how clueless they are, but perhaps years of being deferred to by business clients and fawning students has made them overestimate their incompetence. I can, however, blame the attorney generals of 17 states, the 100 members of the U.S. Congress, for signing onto this document after it had been ridiculed in every corner of the internet. To sign onto something you know is wrong, well, that's just pathetic. Now, Gelman says, I disagree with Senator Chris Murphy. He described recent attempts to reverse the election as the most serious attempt to overthrow our democracy in the history of our country. It's not serious. It's buffoonish. It's stupid. It's just hilariously dumb. And it has absolutely no chance.
Those are my patients. Those are the people that I see. How about injections for back pain? Well, again, why are we doing thousands, millions of injections for back pain in this country? Because they work. People get relief. It might be temporary, but people get relief. But when you compare injections versus placebo injections, there's no difference. The placebo injections work as well as the regular injections. And we're talking about meta-analysis where there's large numbers of studies pooled together. Another big review, 18 studies, no strong evidence for or against the use of any type of injection therapy. Again, because they're comparing it to placebos. Next. Medications. Medications can be very helpful for pain. We use narcotics for pain oftentimes in this country. One of the problems with long-term narcotic use is not only addiction and overuse and spreading into the society. The number of deaths due to narcotic overdose has tripled in the last decade. But narcotics can cause a hyperalgesia. They can cause a sensitization of the brain to pain, actually in a sense making pain worse over time. How about alternative therapies? Acupuncture can be very helpful for painful conditions. But when you compare acupuncture to sham acupuncture, there's a little difference between the two. How about psychological treatment for chronic pain? That would make sense. That's what I'm getting at, right? There's a big, busy slide, but the bottom line is that cognitive behavioral therapy and behavioral therapies have shown to have weak effects in improving pain. For fibromyalgia, cognitive behavioral therapy has been shown to have some effects on mood and disability, but in reducing pain about roughly a half of a point on a 10-point pain scale. So not huge effects, small effects. Positive effects, but small effects. And for low back pain, similar findings. Oftentimes what I've seen as I've gotten into the world of pain is the psychological treatments for pain tend to help you cope with the pain, help you be more functional with the pain, which is important, and I do that, and it's necessary. But it's often not sufficient from my point of view, because what I'm trying to discern is the brain causing the pain in the first place or not? If it is, then maybe the psychological treatment could be directed to curing the pain or resolving it as opposed to coping with it. And the other thing that I found is that much of the social work and psychology world has been trained in cognitive behavioral therapy, which is an efficacious form of therapy. But it doesn't always deal with emotions. And emotions are at the core of chronic pain. So patients want to know, number one, what's causing it and can we make it go away? So I have a simplified version of understanding pain. One, is it caused by tissue damage? Or two, is it caused by a neural pathway? Everyone knows that tissue damage can cause pain, and I work very hard at trying to determine if my patients have a tissue damage problem or not. When someone comes to me with pain in their hip and I look at the x-ray and I examine their hip and they need a new hip, they need a new hip. If they have pain shooting down their leg and they have a foot drop and the reflex isn't working and the muscle strength is down, then there's some pressure on that nerve. That's obvious to me and to their doctors. But the vast majority of patients that I see have neural pathway pain. So what's a neural pathway? When you learn how to ride a bicycle, your brain creates a whole network of neurons that form into this ability to ride a bicycle. It's a very complex process. Once you learn it, the more you practice it, it gets ingrained. And then pretty soon you never forget it. It's there at the drop of a hat. And how often do we use neural pathways in our everyday? Why am I doing this as opposed to that or this, right? These are neural pathways. How we laugh, how we smile, how we brush our teeth, how we walk. 5 + 5 is 10. There's millions of these neural pathways we're using all the time. And pain can be a neural pathway. So I saw a physician who was in Vietnam in the late 60s, and he was in a firefight, and there was gore and blood, and he got shrapnel wounds to his leg and got medevaced out, and a lot of his buddies died or were maimed. And he had pain and limping in his left leg, which lasted for several months. He got rehab, got home, he was fine. Pain gone, limping gone. Goes to medical school, becomes a doctor. 20 years later, he's walking down the street with his wife, and all of a sudden he has the same pain in his left leg and the same limping that he had 20 years ago with the injury. And he tells his wife, this is crazy. What's going on? And she says, you know, that's weird, but do you hear that? There's this helicopter buzzing by. That's weird. He had an injury which became learned, just like we learn anything, in his brain that created a pain memory. And that pain memory was triggered 20 years later by something that happened. Pain can be a neural pathway. And what I tell my patients is, you also have neural pathways of no pain. Our brain is connected to every cell and fiber of our bodies all the time. And all those pathways are going on. And most of them are working just fine, no pain. So injury causes a signal which goes to the brain. And the brain interprets that signal as either danger or no danger. Have you ever seen a kid skin his knee and then cry when the mother comes running, but not when they skin their knee? Because the brain is interpreting danger or no danger. The brain can turn off pain, physical pain that's caused by an injury, by turning off the danger signal. When the danger signal is activated, that's what causes pain. All pain occurs in the brain, whether it's due to an injury or whether it's not due to an injury. A physical threat or an emotional threat activates the danger signal in the brain, which can activate pain. So there's a lot of back pain and neck pain in this country. It's estimated 85% of people will have back pain or neck pain at some point in their life. And a lot of times it's because of an injury and it gets better. But sometimes it becomes chronic. And when pain becomes chronic, you get an MRI. And when you get an MRI, guess what you find? Chances are your MRI is going to be abnormal, because MRIs are abnormal in people who have no pain. This is a study, and there's a dozen or so studies now of adults who have no pain who get MRIs for the purpose of a study. And what they find is that the majority of middle-aged and older adults have abnormal MRIs. And that includes bulging discs, herniated discs, protruding discs, arthritis, all sorts of things. And there's a study done recently in 21-year-olds in Denmark, and 50% of them had evidence of degenerative disc disease. These are healthy, normal 21-year-olds. And 25% had bulging discs. MRI abnormalities are normal. You can't tell who has pain by looking at the MRI. I've been to so many radiologists, and I look and they say, oh, there's the pain. They're looking at, there it is. So when you get an MRI, if you have pain, what's the doctor going to tell you? Oh, we found it. There's the source of the pain. They may not tell you that these same findings are seen in people who don't have pain. This is a lady I saw several years ago. She came in with back pain, no leg pain, back pain. Her exam was perfectly normal. No reflexes were normal, strength was normal, everything was fine. And what would you think if someone said, here's your MRI. This is your back. Look, at 2 levels, the nerve roots are being compressed due to bulging discs. That doesn't look good, right? This is scary. She was scheduled for surgery. She came to see me for I don't know why. And I said, you know, your exam's normal. And I took her life history. And it seemed like the pain began, that she had issues in her early life. I'll talk about that. Pain began at a time when she was having more issues in her life. And the emotional and the physical came together. And she's had pain for 9 years. Her pain went away in 2 weeks, totally gone. She didn't need surgery. She called me 6 months later because her pain had come back. I said, oh, really? What happened? Did you fall? Did you trip? Did you injure yourself? She said, no. It started around noon, and at 10 a.m. that morning, we got a letter from the Department of Defense that my daughter was being deployed to Iraq. I think that's what caused my recurrence of pain. She had this knowledge that pain could be caused by something other than a structural disease process. So what I do is try to sort this out. The last thing I want to do is tell people they have a mind-body problem or a neural pathway problem, when in fact, they have a structural abnormality. I don't want to do that. That fills me with fear. That causes me to have back pain. So I do the neurologic exam. I try to determine, is this pain related to the MRI findings or not? Is the pain consistent or does it vary? Does it shift from one side to the other? Is it better when you do this and worse when you do that? Is it consistent? I have a friend who's a psychologist who does this work in California. And he was having heel pain. He called me up. He said, I know. I must have done something to my heel. It's tender to touch. When I push it, it hurts. Every time I walk on it, it hurts. I said, yeah, sounds like you might have something wrong with your heel. And he said, you know, but it's funny that 2 nights ago, I woke up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. I woke up, I walked to the bathroom, went back. Didn't hurt at all. It was fine. I said, aha! We've caught it. And so you know what he did? He said, oh my God, that's what it is. So he started walking. He walked back and forth. You know what he said to himself? I'm fine. There's nothing wrong. Stop it. Everything's cool. I'm okay. 15 minutes later, pain gone. He had made the diagnosis that this was a neural pathway problem, and then he had treated it by changing how he thought about it and how he treated it. It's shocking. What I find is that as people get older, the stress in their life goes up. And oftentimes, The early stress is the key. So let's take a typical patient that I might see would be a woman who as a child had, let's say, an emotionally abusive father. Could be even worse, but let's just say emotionally abusive father. No symptoms as a child. This is what she's used to. At 15, she gets a boyfriend. It's nice initially, but then he becomes emotionally abusive, spreads pictures, lies about her, showing pictures around the school, and sleeps with her best friend, and her other friends shun her, and all of a sudden she's got migraine headaches. And when she's 25, she marries a guy who turns out to be emotionally abusive, maybe physically abusive, harsh with her children, and she gets stomach pain, irritable bowel syndrome, pelvic pain. And then when she's 35, she divorces the jerk, but he's still trying to not pay his child support or turn the kids against her. And then she gets in a car accident, a little fender bender, and her neck goes like that. And then she gets neck pain. And then the pain spreads from her neck down to her back and to her arms. And then she gets anxiety and depression. And by the time she sees me, she has a list this long of disorders that are all part and parcel. And none of them are, cancer or kidney stones or something that's a structural abnormality. Can the brain create pain? It turns out it can. A study from Pittsburgh shows that physically induced pain and hypnotically induced pain are actually exactly the same in the brain. The pain that my patients have and your patients have is real. There's no such thing as imaginary pain. Fibromyalgia is real. The pain is real. It is not a disease in the body. The tissues of the body are normal. So something's going on in the brain. And what we call it, I call it neural pathway pain, but a lot of my colleagues call it central pain sensitization syndrome. And it turns out that people with back pain have the same amplified evidence of amplified pain when you study their brains. And it turns out that when you give people physical pain and scan their brain, you see what happens. And when you give people emotional pain, this was done at the University of Michigan, and they did that by showing them a picture of an ex-girlfriend or boyfriend who had dumped them in the past 6 months. That is a cruel study to do. But it turns out the emotional pain causes the exact same pathways in the brain to light up as the physical pain. In UCLA, they did a series of studies, and they made people feel socially excluded by playing a computer game and then socially excluding them within the game. And they studied their pain pathways, and it turns out pain pathways occur when you get socially excluded. And pain threshold goes down, more sensitive to pain when you're in an emotionally upset state. I talked about childhood victimization. We know that fibromyalgia is associated with higher rates of childhood victimization. We know that migraine headaches, interstitial cystitis, or painful bladder syndrome, pelvic pain, irritable bowel are associated with higher rates of childhood adversity. And when you study people in prospective ways, when you study, you do MRIs on them, and then 5 years later another MRI, and you do psychological variables, and 5 years later repeat that, the change in the MRI are not correlated with people who get or don't get back pain. The psychological variables are correlated with if you get or don't get back pain. And a study in Norway found that back pain, so people doing physical work with their arms, that pain was associated with issues related to their bosses and their leadership and their decision making, not associated with how much work they were doing. When you get a back injury, you go to the emergency room and they scan your brain, as they did in the study from Chicago, and then they follow you. It turns out the people who are more likely to develop chronic back pain are those who have this functional connectivity between the nucleus accumbens and the prefrontal cortex, which is an emotionally laden component. So you can
Okay, let's have a look at the Trump rally today. The Grapers are not big fans of Lady MAGA, apparently. So they were yelling shame, shame, shame at Lady MAGA. Here's some more. Shame, 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 shame,
predict who's more likely to develop chronic pain. And in a study from Chicago, John Burns' lab, when they took people with back pain and they had them recall a time when they were angry, he measured that their back muscles tightened up. Emotion connected to physical pain. And it turns out that this central sensitization has a whole variety of syndromes associated with it, from TMJ, migraine, tension, headache, irritable bowel, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, PTSD. Boy, PTSD, that's an anxiety problem. You have a stressful event, and then you have phobias, flashbacks, anxiety, fears. But it's kind of the same. These all go together. Next slide. PTSD is related to fibromyalgia and irritable bowel syndrome, and vice versa. You can train your brain to stop pain. There's a study from Stanford where they train people to change their brain to reduce pain by biofeedback. So what do? I take a lot of time with my patients to get their whole life story. Did they have a difficult childhood? that set up the pathways for fear and danger pathways in their life? Do they have many of these other associated symptoms? That's a pattern that you're seeing. What was the injury? How severe was the injury? When did the pain start? With a typical injury, you get pain, and then it gets better. It heals. With a mind-body type pain, the injury occurs, and then over time you rest, and the pain gets worse. That's not typical pattern of normal healing. The healing occurs, but the brain is taken over to produce pain. Are the symptoms inconsistent and variable, as I mentioned with my friend with the heel pain? Is the physical exam significant? Like the guy with the hip where you can't move his hip, well, there's a hip problem. Or can they move the hip fine, but it hurts like crazy? And what do the tests show? Is the MRI showing normal aging, which is what my MRI shows in my neck? I've got gray hair, right? It's normal aging, they have gray hair, it doesn't hurt. Sometimes it hurts.